I just wanted to talk about what it takes to stay in this and what it takes. And John was talking about it some there about taking that buck, passing that buck. CURE SORT, if you're not familiar, CURE is a national prison reform organization. CURE stands for Citizens United for the Rehabilitation of Errants. And Charlie Sullivan, the director of CURE, who he and his wife Pauline have done that for over 40 years, started in Texas and moved to Washington in 1985 when they realized if you're going to do something on a national scale in policy and criminal justice, you need to be near the ones trying to twist their arms, which, as we know today, is getting harder all the time. Shortly after he got to Washington, he realized, as it was beginning to really explode, that there was a need for chapters in each state. Things happen in all states. We have legislatures that are different. So state chapters were formed. And then they realized there are some specific issues that just have a lot more going on than, say, some of the others. And so a death penalty chapter was formed, veterans chapter was formed, a federal chapter, women chapter, and a man in Michigan started the chapter about sex offender issues. SORT stands for Sex Offenders Restored Through Treatment. And I got to tell you, though, that last word is becoming more and more difficult to discuss because treatment today has become almost an additional part of the industrial complex that's going on. And I'm really just very disgusted with what's happening in a lot of prisons and in a lot of treatment programs where they're almost more an interrogator and a cop than they are somebody to help take somebody's life that has fallen apart and start putting the pieces back together. I can tell you that had I been in prison today in Kansas like I was in the 1970s and 80s, I probably wouldn't have gotten to know you. I probably might not have gotten out. Probably I would have been under civil commitment. And I've talked to, my therapist was Dr. Fred Berlin at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And we've talked that, I probably would have been a good candidate since I had a second charge. But the things that go on in the prisons today don't allow a person to really open up and share. I had and I'm not going to get on to my story, but I just wanted to say this. I had the very strong fortune to really open up my eyes to what was going on in my life in about a 3.5-month period that was considered the pre-sentence investigation in my case. I was allowed to stay in Baltimore during that time until the judge called me back to Kansas for sentencing. And my attorney said, get in everything you can. And I mean, I talked everything, I shared everything, we cried, we got angry, mad. I heard other people's examples of what was happening in their life, and all of a sudden it made sense in something in my life, and it made sense. And I think I left Baltimore and went back to Kansas for sentencing, and even though the judge did go ahead and sentence me, I felt I was ready to take on me from now on. And I was very fortunate that there were 3 different group sessions that I was in over a period of time in the Kansas system. And each one of those just added something to what I already had learned. Now, I had the fortune of already having my eyes wide open from everything that I had brought to my attention in Baltimore. That today, and I have a good friend that I met when I was there, and sadly, he is still in the Kansas system. And he tells me that today it's much different. He would have to sign a waiver saying anything that he said could be held against him and probably towards civil commitment, could be used, for the registry, you name it. I don't consider that therapy. there is a time and a place for that to happen. But at that moment, it needs to be about therapy. So anyway, it's gotten a lot tougher to deal with that, and I can see over a period of time that what I am doing and what Cure Sort is doing today, we're spending a lot more time answering questions about the registry, civil commitment fears, what state should I move to upon leaving, what do I face? I'm scared to death. I hear I can't find a place to live. I can't find a job. These are horrible fears that people are facing. And I want to say that I really think a lot of you, and I saw the roster in the program, and I hope it'll be okay with you if I contact some of you in the future. I get letters from all over the country from people that don't know where to turn. And the one thing that we take pride in doing is try to get them an answer. I may not have the answer on how to get them out, but I can at least give them resources and a bit of hope as they move forward. And I think Lauren Perry was the name of the man that started Cure Sort in 1990. And I joined on with him in 1993. He twisted my arm when we met at a Cure convention in Washington, and he asked if I would take on Sort. He had some other plans. And eventually I moved to Michigan to work with him in 1996, and sadly he came down with cancer shortly after that and died in early 1997. So some of his other plans did not, materialize. But I think what I want to talk about with the long, hard haul, that name I gave was in honor of my dad, who was a counselor and a psychologist and an educational instructor and counselor. He used to talk to people when they come in to him about getting married. And one of the things he said, there's a time and a place when the hormones are going to slow down, and when that buzz in the eye is going to slow down, and you got the long, hard haul ahead of you. Are you ready for it? And I can't think of anything that fits better for what we do in this work than it is a long, hard haul. I got out of prison in 1989 and learned of Cure before I moved back to Baltimore on parole. And they had a convention pretty shortly after I got there, and I got connected with the Maryland chapter. Then it was a few years after that I then learned about Lauren and Cure Sort and got involved there. So I've been involved with this since 1993, and I've seen a lot of changes and a lot of people come and go. I think some of the things that John was talking about and your administrative team is talking about are things you really want to consider and take to heart, because this is hard work. It's probably, of all the criminal justice work, about as difficult as any there is to do. Now, the man who got me off the registry is doing death penalty work more than anything now in Round Rock, Texas. I would say that one probably even goes to the more of an extreme, but it is difficult. And so when you get into this, I think that you need to realize there's going to be days that you think, I don't know that I want to do this anymore. I can think of times when we've had a good discussion, say, Rebecca, with a conference call with our administrative team. And it seemed like things are going good, got some new people joining up, finding out some good things, meeting some legislators that sound positive. And then we open the Oklahoman or watch Channel 5 that night on the news, and there's another bad case. Folks, those bad cases are going to continue as long as the world is here, sadly. We're very weak humans, and we are a very sexual people, and somehow these issues get pushed to the top more than a lot of the other things that are going on. It makes good entertainment. It makes good coverage on the media, and so that gets focused on. And so it is work with something that's very negative. I'm a big baseball fan, and do I need to tell you, Brenda, when it's done? Okay, yeah, you can change it. One of the things about baseball, and I've followed it as long as I can remember, it's more than a sport. It's a marathon. And Paul, my Cardinals didn't quite meet up to your Red Sox last year.
What can I say, Wayne? The better team
and that's part of living it, you know, but it's a 6-month season. It's a grind. It starts when they're in the beautiful weather in Florida, and then they end up going to Boston on opening day or Detroit. I remember a game I went to in Kansas City on opening day, and there was snow falling, and I thought, and this is fun? And then it ends exciting. But it's a long, long season. Things happen. Good teams are struggling. All of a sudden, the teams you don't think are going to do anything come along. But there's one part of baseball that always stands out to me. It's a game based on failure. And that's how I see the analogy to our work. A good hitter in today's time, now that we don't have a Ted Williams anymore, hits about 3 out of 10. That means he fails 7 out of 10 times. That, you know, in any other field of endeavor would be considered a failure. So we see that all the time. You see a pitcher think he's doing a good job of pitching, and all of a sudden every pitch he's throwing is going out in the outfield for a base hit. So as I watch all this, and Rebecca, now you can understand a little bit of when you can't get me and I'm watching a Cardinal game, that's part of it. But it is an area where success many times is about overcoming failure. And we have to do that in our work all the time. I know I heard of some people who were in the Cure organization and came to a national meeting and made a public statement that I don't think that we should associate with people who have sex offenses. And I didn't have to say a thing. Thank goodness for some of the other chapter people there that really put that person down and worked with that one. And luckily, he came along. It was just, he had a mindset like all the people that we have to deal with that have a mindset that these are awful people and how dare we associate with them. But somebody stood up and said, you know, we get into this work and we don't have the opportunity to separate who it is that we're working with. The worst of the murderers, the worst cases in the world, the minute they're involved, all of a sudden they could be people that we represent and should be ready to. I remember we had a little spat on the emails recently in Oklahoma about somebody made a statement about that person doesn't deserve to have a chance. And I remember I thought, no, we can't see it that way. Bad, what happened? Remember how we hate the sin and love the sinner. And we all have to remember that. That's the work we're in. So knowing that we have that, knowing we have that kind of emotion, knowing we have that to face every day, I think it's very important that a structure is set up so that you feel comfortable. At least you have that in place. You're going to have the emotion of dealing with cases all the time. You're going to have the emotion of in your chapter or in your group, you may have somebody you have to work with. I'll be honest, I know that there have been times in the past where there have been some RSOL people I know that I've met in the past that no longer come here. We've got them with cure. We have a couple of internal things going on right now that I wish I didn't have to spend time on a committee call. But it's part of organization, and it's part of making you a stronger group. So I encourage you to take heed to what John said a while ago, and the stronger you can be, it helps you in the other work that you do. You can go on. One of the biggest things that I found was the more people you can get involved, the better. And that's hard. It's a very difficult thing because we know this is not easy work. I think some of the people in this field just disappear. And I used to talk with Lauren Perry about that, and he said his thought is some people are just so emotionally damaged by all that happened through, first of all, acting out, then the prison thing, possibly losing their family, then trying to face society. And Lauren died before the registry even came about. But we know how tough that is for some people. And so for some, it is very hard for them to move on. And we need to respect that and realize we're not going to have everybody who is on a registry, who is somebody who had an offense, come along and be a part of us. Hopefully, we can find a place for them. John mentioned something a while ago. Finding somebody that's good at software, finding somebody that's a good computer person. Somebody like that might not like to come public, but they could do a lot of work in the background, the so-called behind the scenes. Policy writing, position papers, those are so important. And finding people that can do that. We've had some pretty good success in Oklahoma contacting lawmakers about various legislation. Not everybody can go to the Capitol and talk face-to-face to a lawmaker. But some can write letters, emails, phone calls, and even some might say, you get it all together and I'll stamp it for you and I'll mail them for you. We need to find a way to get everybody involved. So people is very important. Again, I've said it already, we do have a tough subject that we're dealing with. And we do have differing views about some of it. I think the best thing you can do if there is a difficulty is get everybody together and talk about it. Don't let that fester. I think that's one of the most difficult things that can occur, and before you know it, something's out of, all of a sudden you got somebody over here that's splintered from you. But I think the last thing about just following about personal issues, you do have to develop a tough skin. It is tough work. But your organization needs to be good, and to face all that you face in this field. And I think another thing with that is develop as big a group of people as you can to discuss those, to call on. Paul, I remember some time ago you called me about a civil commitment question. Those kind of things are important. To have somebody that you know that you can contact about a specific thing. I get letters all the time from people who think our organization is a treatment program because of the name. And that is difficult. Probably if we had it to do over, we would have named it something different. But hey, there it is. So we have a packet that we put together of information about 4 different organizations that have a database and a referral program that if somebody contacts them, they can line them up with a therapist in a certain part of the country. We have a large resource thing on addiction. One of the things I pride myself in is trying to get people in prison information on real counseling and real therapy, knowing that a lot of them aren't getting it. we have developed a self-help program that's put together by people who've lived it, who've experienced it. And we send that if somebody asks for it, along with a large listing of books and where they can get those if they need them. So having those is very important. I want to go over a little bit, and this may be something that Janice already covered, and I think there was one other panel you had about starting an organization, but I just want to talk about some of this because I think it's very important. I know we are starting a new concept with CURE and doing something that, John, again, you mentioned a while ago about helping chapters begin, develop that are just new. Kay Perry, who is Lauren's sister, who has been the director of the Michigan CURE chapter since it began, has been a real big mover for CURE. Before each of our conventions holds a chapter enhancement workshop for new people or somebody that just wants to build some new strengths in what they're doing. We now have a chapter support committee that is chaired by Kay, and I sit on that. And we have certain elements that each chapter must have in place to be considered in compliance. Some have complained that we're making them do things that get them away from the work that they got into this to do. And yes, it is. And yes, for me, over a period of time, I have to take some time away and do things like that. But it's things like incorporation, having letterhead, have a brochure, have business cards, phone number, address. All of these things are very important. A newsletter to send out. So we feel that it is vital for a chapter to have all of that in place so that they can be a valid organization. And then with all of that, the information they put out is the kind of thing they want to support RSOL with. So one of the first things we do, naturally, a name. I know that some of you have a different name than just RSOL. And I know there's different reasons that you do that, just like ours in CURE SORT. You know, you may have another area, but you are the affiliate for that state with RSOL. So it's important to have that. I think these items, I remember, I think it was the conference in St. Louis, that legislator who talked from Missouri, who came, I remember he said, when you go talk to a legislator, be sure you hand him all your contact information. And anybody you meet, if you can't give them information about who you are, how to get in touch with you, you know, it's going to be hard to follow up on that. We all get, the minute we walk out this door, we're going on to something else. You know, we might forget what we were thinking about right in here. So it's important to have these items in place so that you can share those with people and then get back with each other on something. Okay. Before you get to your incorporation documents, I think it's very important to have bylaws. And I hope I'm not stepping on the toes of anything RSOL does. This is just what we do with CURE. And so I'm just sharing that and see if that goes with where you're at. Again, bylaws help formulate your organization. There will always be times when something comes up that could be a conflict. How many do you have to have for an official vote? What's a quorum? How often do you have an annual meeting? Anybody think of some other areas you have concerns? If you don't have those are important. It's vital to have that and get in a position where that becomes an argument, and you'll see how important it is to have those. A mission statement with those. And the reason I mentioned both of them ahead of the incorporation, I don't know how it is in every state, but CURE SORT is a corporation in the state of Michigan. Even though I live in Oklahoma, that's where it was founded. That's where we continue to have our corporate papers. We have a resident agent there. One of the people on our board is in Michigan, so we follow that to stay in compliance. But in turning in all of our documents to the Corporation Commission of Michigan, you have to have bylaws, you have to have a mission statement. So it was important to have all of that in place, and bless his heart, thank Lauren for having all of that there. We had to update it some after he died because some of the goals that he had, we no longer were going to go that direction. So you can do that with the corporation also. Any change that you want to make, you just put an amendment in and do that. And then you get to the nonprofit. Now, we're a 501c3, which means there's a limit on how much lobbying we can do. Are most of you fours, or those of you that have gotten, is that the direction that RSOL is going? Yeah, I would think, because knowing just the premise of RSOL, a 4 is a better fit, I think, for what you're doing. The one difference there is your donations are not tax exempt. Ours are tax exempt, so that's been a positive there. I guess knowing that we're somebody that represents people in every state, we don't get that involved personally in legislation. We may give information or referrals to people, but are not doing that ourselves. If all of a sudden some financier came along and gave a huge donation to us where we had a lot more and had where we weren't doing all this work voluntarily, then maybe we'd consider, going somewhere. I know a couple of times I've been asked, would I come to a certain state to be an expert witness? I don't do that, by the way. It'd be very difficult without knowing the person that I'm representing. I might go talk about what CureSort does and what we as an organization do, but I don't do that to represent a person because I don't know them. So that, if I'm getting ahead of the thing there for you, I'm sure that may be something you're going to be looking at down the road. Our board has gone through several changes. You heard one of our board members, former board members, Thursday, Chrysanthi Leon, at one time was on our board. We have a PhD and therapist from Los Angeles, Nancy Irwin, who not only works with offenders, she came to the first conference, didn't you, with Betty, who passed away, Betty Schneider. She was a victim and also works with offenders and victims, so feel that's a real good combination to have, working with offenders. We have a man in Maryland who's been very involved with the law firm that's won the case recently, Tom Schlabowski. I think those of you in that area know Tom. And I'm proud to say, I don't think it's a secret, he's going to work on his law degree starting this fall, which means we may need a new board member. But those are just a couple of the people that are on our board. We have tried to keep a balance with people with different backgrounds. We've had parents on our board in the past who have a son incarcerated. Again, having that balance really gives you a good way to get difference in opinion and information. I wouldn't want everybody to think like I think. I think it's important that we all have a different way of looking at things. We do have regular meetings, and again, I think this is something that's very important. It's very easy if you let those slack, all of a sudden you're not doing anything. Because I have board members in Michigan, Maryland, Los Angeles, New Mexico, I'm in Oklahoma, we have conference calls. We do have an annual meeting when we try to get everybody together. But So we try to have those about every 2 months. And we do a lot by email on information, of sharing information so that we can get right to, shall we say, the brass tacks in our meetings. Other information that's really important to have out there, I think this is as important as your contact information. A website, newsletter, and a brochure. I imagine the brochure would come before getting a newsletter going. If you can, a newsletter is very vital. About half of our database are prisoners. And of course, about the only way they're going to get information is from the newsletter. Some get frustrated thinking that's all we're doing, you know, and I try to write them and tell them some of the other things that are going on that unfortunately they're just not a part of. But it's vital that they get information. We have been on a series over the last 2 or 3 years trying to have something substantive about therapy in our newsletter each issue, because we know so many of them are not getting therapy. So we try to do that. Website, well, if you are very fortunate to have somebody that's really good at that and can really put you something together that's bold and a lot of information, that is vital for you. Am I there, Brenda? Is that?
You ready to move on?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
started to go forward and I thought you weren't ready.
Fundraising, and I know this is something that RSOL has really been getting in this year, and I commend you for it. I think a lot of people don't realize we need things if you don't ask. And I don't know of anybody in our organization that does any work that's not voluntary. I assume that's how it is with RSOL's chapter leaders. And we could do a lot more if we had a lot of money. And I think the more we can be bold, and as Lenore said about thinking out of the box, I think it's vital that we do that. And I think we found one of the things in our donation letters is to always talk about things that we have either done or are planning to do. Don't just ask for money. I mean, we all know it's tight, you know, and everything we have is vital. We have to survive ourselves. We have specific things. But I think if we really want to get involved, it's important that we share with them how vital it is and how much they can mean to us if they would become a participant and help us, and then let them know what we're doing. So I commend what's going on with RSOL in that area. We do have a membership process, and that's always been with CURE. And I'll just tell you what that is so that you have an idea how that goes. We have a donation scale that is set up, and all of those are very fair. Our prisoner donation scale is $2 a year. And if a prisoner contacts us and can't afford that, like I know in this state, a prisoner doesn't get paid, right? There's not a job that a Texas prisoner gets. So if they write and say, I'd really like to participate, we'll put them on as an indigent member, and we're happy to do that and try to keep them updated on that. Our family one, I believe, is $20, and we have something up to $100. I think we have a lifetime when you can donate for $100. So we keep those in a fair area. Now, we do put out a couple of donation letter pleas throughout the year where, you know, we will talk about programs that we have going on, and those become very helpful. I think a lot of people like to use those at a time to just assist us more. So I our database, one of the real difficult things with it, and maybe you find this too, I tell you, keeping up with where prisoners are is, I spend probably a good part of several days updating in every newsletter or every mailing we have. Then I have a pretty good stack where I have to update them. That's the only way I use the website, the registry, to find people. Like if somebody's gone, if they put on their paroled, and I write them a letter and I apologize and say, I hope I haven't offended you by finding you, but you had been participating with us, and I did find your name here. That's the only way I go, and I'm offended by that thing, and I won't use it any other way. But there is state information you can get in each state to find an inmate locator on the corrections database, and I use that just to update. So that's important. I think overall what we're doing is just trying to get the word out about the importance of helping people who unfortunately in their lives had something difficult happen. It may have been a one-time thing. It may be a disorder. It may be an addiction. It may be something that's very serious. And we try to work with every area. At times I get a bit concerned that I think examples that are used so often are the consensual cases of young people, and those are serious. They shouldn't be an offense. That's an issue among the family, it shouldn't be a crime. But a lot of times that becomes the emphasis, and because I can think of my own life, there are people who had serious issues in their lives who can turn it around. And we can't forget about those people. And I think it's important that we talk about everyone. I'll just open it. Any questions, anything? I know I've talked more brass tacks stuff than, but be happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Not really a question, but a suggestion from being part of other organizations is that if, as an organization, you have a list of things that need to be done, it can be overwhelming, right? Looking at that long list of having business cards and websites and all that stuff. Just make the list, right? Brainstorm of all of the dream big, dream of all these things you'd like to have, and make that list available publicly and share it as often as you can at every meeting, because you don't know who's in the audience. I've been, just as a personal story, I've been coming to these things, the Texas and this, and I've never really heard, other than website requests, that's not the first time, what else I could do to help, right? And I'm sure there's lots of people, I see them one meeting, I don't see them the next meeting, that are kind of chemically like me, that want to help, right? Want to do something to help. But if we don't see something that we can do, then often those people drift off and don't participate any longer. So anyway, just a point of help to help.
Good point. Thank you.
Any questions?
Well, again, yeah.
Wayne, just what is your assessment? Now, you've been doing this forever. What is your assessment of the positive and negative developments over that period of time?
I am encouraged that more people can talk intelligently about people who have sexually offended, the ability to change, the ability for recovery. The registry doesn't work. Most people who offend have done so against someone they know or a relative. It seems like that information is out there much more than I used to see it. I remember it used to be you had to hammer some of those things every time. And I think also I'm encouraged by the number of organizations that are involved in this work. I know when Lauren started the thing and I got involved in 1993, it was hard to find other organizations that were doing like work. And so I was very encouraged. SOSIN started getting involved. There's some others, I'm going to leave some out, but when you started RSOL, I just thought, well, this is great. I think if there was one thing we could have done differently at the start, with Cure was had more branch chapters or, made it regional. We have a few chapters who are very intelligent about sex offense issues. Colorado has a tremendous thing going. They've got 2 or 3 organizations besides their people with Cure are very good with it. That's why I am very happy to work with RSOL, because say I get a letter from somebody in a state and I don't, I can connect them with somebody. I can answer some of what's going on, but I'm not going to know the registry. Maybe I'm tattling on myself that I don't have each state's registry memorized, but again, those change on a regular basis. And so I would rather send them to Bob in Arkansas, or to find out, let that person communicate right there. One of the things we did at the very beginning, when we started our earlier website and we had it printed, we had a board member he researched every registry and had a fact sheet put together on every one. We put that on our old website. About 6 months later, that was obsolete because every legislature, as they meet, they made changes. And so finally, we just had to say, I can give you the website address. You're going to have to go get it, you're going to have to investigate this yourself. It was just more than we could keep up with. But I think the biggest thing that I've seen is there's more information. Now, we get frustrated that the 10 o'clock news still loves to really hammer some case that just broke, this afternoon and wherever. That's, I guess for them, that sells TV coverage. But we know that that is not the kind of information that really helps at all. I've noticed so many of them, always it's about somebody that person knew. And I've written a lot of the media people when I see them, and I'll write right to the reporter, I don't write a letter to the editor, and just say, by the way, that person wasn't on the registry, and that was people that person knew, and that fits exactly the stereotype that we know of. And you're making big things out of it, and really, it's not that big a story in the big scope of things. Oklahoma's got a lot more problems than that one case.
You've been involved in the law for years, and you talk about people who dropped out of the system. Can you suggest any strategies to overcome burnout?
Yeah, I mentioned baseball. That is my passion. It always has been. My life before incarceration was journalist. I was sports writer of the year of high schools in Kansas in 1980. So for me, when I get into an event, that I'm away from it. And there's times you just feel hopeless in it. But I think it's vital, have whatever your passion and your fun is. We all need to help educate this country that sexuality and sex is not a dirty word. It's the second biggest drive there is next to survival. And somehow with all of this junk that we deal with, it's become bad. And we really can help if we could just help people understand that more. Thank you very much.